I'm David Yager, President and CEO of University of the Arts, and I have the pleasure today to be talking to Dr. Jonathan Fineberg, who is the director of our PhD program at University of the Arts. So Jonathan, it's been, I should know this, but 5 years, I guess?
Yeah.
Since, probably a little over 5, since we had our first conversation about the concept of this PhD program, and would you be interested in being the founding director? And so, in a short sort of summary, could you give us a sense of where it started and sort of where we are right now, which is a pretty incredible place?
Yeah, I've always been interested in creativity, which you have too. You and I are very much on the same page here. And I found myself doing neuroscience because I finally realized I needed to understand that in order to be able to answer the question about how creativity works and why images have such a claim on our attention as they do. So that's what I was thinking about, and I wrote a book that had to do with that, and you were at a conference where I talked about that book, and we had this conversation, and I had no idea who you were. And I thought, God, that's one of the brightest people I've ever met. And when I walked down, you said to me, I said, I'm going to probably move to Philadelphia because I'm retiring from all the other jobs I've been in. And you said, well, that's funny. Why don't you come have dinner with me? And the next thing I knew, I was starting a PhD program. So that's how this started. And the idea is that after 45 years of supervising PhD students at Yale and at University of Illinois, I never felt we were doing it right. And I realized, we're using a model that's more than 250 years old and hasn't been changed since. And I thought we could really clear away all of the nonsense that universities foist on graduate students and really focus on making a more creative researcher. And I thought that I knew enough now that I could actually teach somebody to be more creative in a field I knew nothing about. And you let me do it.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting. We came up with the idea that a student's background could be from any discipline. And we wanted students who'd been out more in the workplace rather than right out of an undergraduate program. And clearly the first class looked like that, and each class since in some ways has looked more like that. And you're now graduating your first students. So
Right.
What does that feel like to nurture it and now sort of have that first group of students?
Well, they're stunning. And I'll tell you, by popular demand from them, we meet regularly every month on Zoom. And I get into those conversations, I think, God, what a privilege to be here listening to these people. They're so brilliant. So it's been wonderful. And the next group is also wonderful and very different. So that's been really interesting. And I had I know you've been curious to talk about Questlove because he's written a lot. He's in a way a kind of paradigm, the way Christo was for me of what this program ought to aspire to. And he wrote a book called Creative Quest, and I assigned it to my students. And then I fortuitously met him and thought, I got him interested in this program. And we have a very strong set of African American candidates, some of them in music. And I thought, this is a great match, made in heaven. Something that probably besides me, you're the only person that would have done this. I said to him, how about getting us some funding for these students? And he has helped us. It's been really great. So our first Questlove Fellows will be in the next group.
I mean, I believe he also said he wished this program existed when he was back in school. It was the kind of program he would have liked to have gone to also. So it really does, it really separates us from what I would call traditional PhD programs. I had met a lot of faculty who had always told me they got a traditional PhD, but it's not what they wanted. They were always looking for something a little different, and they wound up just doing it because they knew they needed to do it, and they went the fairly traditional way. So it always made sense for me. What about the future? So let's look 5 years from now, whether you're retired or you're part of the program. What would make you happy to see, to really look back now we're looking ahead, but 5 years from now, looking back and saying what we accomplished in the coming 5 years?
Well, as you know, I've been thinking a lot in the last year, and I'm thinking forward about trying to institutionalize the things that I've done so that I'm no longer necessary, because I think that's critical. It has to have its own momentum. And I've been thinking about, who could do what I'm doing, but maybe even better. And there are people out there. We'll find somebody like that.
No, I know when I talk to small family foundations, I always try to find one person who will be the champion and they're willing to take risks. Because I find the same thing when it goes to large foundations. They have large committees and it's just hard to do something different.
Yeah.
So in closing, is there anything else you would think about relative to the PhD program that maybe you would tell a prospective student who was talking to you and said, I'm thinking about this, but your program seems really interesting, but I don't get it, I don't understand it?
Well, this program is truly a bespoke PhD. We try and figure out what is the driving question that you have in your head that your training doesn't prepare you for and that you want to solve and you really have a passion for. And we're going to construct a PhD program around you. And nobody does that but us.
Yeah, it's been really clear. Even the people you've selected to be their mentors are very specific for what area, rather than in most programs they try to plug the peg into the hole.
It's been fascinating that way too. The kind of people who have agreed to be the mentors of these students are some of the most famous people in the world in these different fields, and they're all in different fields. So nobody's committee has everybody in some particular discipline. They're all over the place, and they're having a wonderful time. You wouldn't imagine they would have said yes, and they all did. Nobody turned me down.
And I bet it's much more exciting for the mentors.
Yes.
Having someone who's very focused in an area that they're also interested in.
Yeah, they want to be part of the experiment. They see how experimental this is, and they're really interested in trying it. So we've had great luck in that way. And every one of the students, I would have to say, everyone who's come to me starts out by saying to me, I thought about doing a PhD. I've been looking around for years to try and find a place where I wanted to go. And this is the only one I've ever found that actually fits what I want to do.